Guten gardening, everybody. Well, beside me in this green stalk, I have 3 different tiers of vegetables, and each one of them I think is fantastic in its own way. On the bottom here, we've got kale. In the middle, we've got some Swiss chard, and on top, we've got some sugar beets. And I've already done a video in the past, and you should definitely check it out, but where I talked about why I think everyone should be growing kale. But today's video is actually focused on this middle tier, and that's on Swiss chard, because I think Swiss chard is a phenomenal vegetable that you should be growing, and I'm going to tell you why. But before I tell you some of the things that make Swiss chard such a wonderful vegetable to grow, did you know that Swiss chard is part of the beet family? It's actually essentially a beet that doesn't produce an edible root, but if you take a close look at the leaves of the beets and the leaves of the Swiss chard, you'll see that similarity. All right, let's go ahead and talk about why we think you should be growing Swiss chard. Now, the first place I want to start with our Swiss chard is the nutrient content of this vegetable. And the reason I want to start with nutrient content is there's actually quite a bit to say about Swiss chard. You know, these leafy greens tend to be on the healthier side, and in comparison with spinach, well, I think Swiss chard actually holds up pretty well. One area that it supersedes spinach is its level of vitamin K and its level of vitamin C. And if you're not quite sure of the value of vitamin K, some of the things it helps with are blood clotting, bone health, heart health. So there's a lot that the vitamin K that this provides can be useful for. Now, if you're on a blood thinner, that's something to keep in consideration, because if this helps with blood clotting, it might have some sort of adverse effect. But like a lot of other leafy greens, we've also got plenty of great fiber in here. It's a great source of magnesium as well. Now, something to be cautioned about, just like a lot of our other leafy greens, the Swiss chard is high in oxalates. And so if you have a difficult time with kidney stones, you need to be aware of that. But one of the nice things about Swiss chard, and a lot of these other leafy greens as well, is if you cook them down, you can reduce a large amount of those oxalates. You may not get rid of them in their entirety, but you can reduce them and have less of an issue. So when it comes to nutritional value, I would say that there is plenty of nutritional content in Swiss chard to make it a worthwhile vegetable to grow. Now, next up, let's talk versatility, because this is one of those vegetables that whenever you're eating it, you can eat it raw. It's nice and crunchy, got a really crunchy texture to it, but of course you can cook it and prepare it in a bunch of other dishes as well. And when we talk taste for something like this, and I think that's something important when we talk versatility, the taste is, I would describe it personally as a bit like spinach, but a little bit more on the bitter side. So it's got an earthy bitterness to it, but when it's cooked down, it actually has my favorite taste of any steamed vegetable out there. And I've made that clear, I think, in previous videos. I think when it's cooked down, it actually smells a bit like bales of hay. So I call this eating hay, even though it doesn't taste like that. But it's something to note that this can actually be used. I like to boil it down with some onion as well. I think that flavor pairs well, but it works really well in soups. It works really well in salads. So there's a lot of versatility with this leafy green. Now, another reason why I think you should grow it, and maybe this is a bit superficial of me, but I find this to be an incredibly visually appealing vegetable. You see that brightness, that shininess, almost like a waxiness to it. And there are so many different colors, so many different color stems as well. You get that typical, well, here you go. You can see the typical Swiss chard has a white stem, but you get the rainbow chard and you end up with yellow and red stems like this one. It's absolutely a stunning addition, I think, to any of the dishes out there. And again, that's a little bit superficial. I admit that piece, but hey, who doesn't like a vegetable that also looks as good as it tastes? Now, I probably should have mentioned this whenever I was talking about nutrient content, but I didn't. It's a pretty low calorie vegetable as well. So if you're trying to watch your calories but get a ton of nutrient content as well, this is a great vegetable for you. Now, another reason why we think you should grow this vegetable is that it's actually quite easy to grow. I'm in my indoor growing area with just some high bay lights in here, so nothing really special, I would say, in this growing process. And I'm getting these beautiful Swiss chard leaves that are, well, quite frankly, delicious and they're cut and come again. So I guess I'm kind of combining a couple of things, but as I'm harvesting this and I'm just pulling off these bigger leaves, the leaves that are 5-6 inches, maybe a little bit bigger, I know I can leave this in here and it will continue to grow. So it's easy to grow, it's easy to get started. I've grown it indoors and outdoors, of course, here in Zone 5, Wisconsin, but it's also cut and come again, which means that I can keep that harvest going for multiple months. Now, this is actually a vegetable that is quite nice when it comes to growing in cooler weather. It can handle a pretty good cold streak and taste even a little bit sweeter, but also, you know, if you don't have a winter that's too cold, you could essentially, because this is a biennial plant, meaning that it comes back a second year and that's the year you get seeds, you could essentially have a vegetable that could reseed itself, or you could collect the seeds from it. So I think that's a good thing to note as well. And while they recommend this as a cooler weather plant, it can definitely handle some of the warmer weather as well. So this is a plant that can grow in some of those warmer growing zones, although, you know, that's something you want to keep in mind. The cooler area tends to, I think, a better tasting result. You know, one of the things that happens with a lot of the vegetables that we grow vegetables that, like, I'll give you an example, kohlrabi. Now, we can eat the leaves from kohlrabi and we can eat the kohlrabi bulb itself as well. But once we've harvested that plant, that's what we're getting from it. That's the totality of that harvest, because it's I'll call it a one-off. But again, with a plant like Swiss chard, I mean, you're looking at potentially months of harvest. And so if we're talking about something that's eco-friendly or sustainable because you're really planting it and then getting a lot out of it over time, and I think Swiss chard is a great example of that type of vegetable. Now, I don't typically talk too much about this next thing, but I'm going to lay it out there for you just because, you know, some studies have shown that there are additional health benefits to eating plants and vegetables like Swiss chard. You know, there's a lot that goes into that. I don't know the science behind it. That's one of the reasons why I don't typically talk about it. But I think if you're eating organic vegetables, you're eating vegetables that you've grown at home, you're getting them as fresh as they come because they're right out of the garden, in this case, right out of the green stalk in our indoor garden, then you're going to have, you know, the benefit of those nutrient dense and those healthier vegetables anyway. But you can do your own research to look into the purported health benefits of a plant like Swiss chard. Well, folks, I'd say I probably have a nice meal's worth of this Swiss chard already in my hands. It's a nice little Swiss chard bouquet. But I wanted to do one more thing before I end this video. I wanted to do a little taste test to see the difference between a Swiss chard green and one of our beet greens up here, because as I said, they're in the same family. Let's compare the taste. Well, first I'm going to smell the stems of these. That's the Swiss chard and the beet. And I'll tell you that the beet, even though they're the same family, the beet definitely has a stronger beet-like smell to it. It still has a nice earthy smell. And now let's compare the taste. I'll try the beet green first. Really nice earthy flavor. It's the mildest beet flavor you can have, but you can taste that beet-like sweetness. Not really overly bitter, but maybe a little bit bitter. All right, let's go ahead and try the Swiss chard. Yeah, a little bit bitter, but not a lot. Actually, I prefer the flavor to the beet green. Well, that's raw, of course, but definitely a bit of the sweetness and really not much of the hint of any kind of beet at all. So they look very similar. They're part of the same family, but a pretty different flavor. If I had to pick between the two, raw, I would probably go Swiss chard. Cooked, I would definitely go Swiss chard. Well, in this video, I focused on about a half a dozen reasons why I think you should grow Swiss chard. It is one of the vegetables right alongside with kale that we don't leave out of our garden. It does take about 10 weeks or so before these leaves get to about this size, ready to harvest, depending on your growing area and the temperatures, etc. So it takes a little bit longer than spinach. But again, it lasts a long time. I think it lasts longer than spinach. I think it doesn't bolt the way spinach bolts typically. So it's a leafy green that's going to provide you a ton of nutrient content, and it's going to be something that I think your whole family will enjoy. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you found it useful as always. And if you're encouraged to grow Swiss chard, maybe for the first time, maybe to continue growing it, we'd love to hear about that in the comments. If it's a vegetable that you already always grow, we'd love to hear why in the comments as well. If you did enjoy today's video, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.